On NEWSCENTER tonight. North Korea confirms that its leader Kim Jong-un will be meeting soon with Russian President Vladimir Putin, while reports trickle in on the details of the summit arrangements. We have the latest.
The US decides it will no longer give waivers to countries like South Korea to buy oil from Iran, meaning Korean companies will have to find more expensive alternatives.
Tough road ahead for lawmakers in the nation as the National Assembly is expected to fast-track key bills on Thursday, despite the main opposition party's strong objection.
Creditors of Asiana Airlines plan to provide $1.4 billion in financial support to the debt-laden carrier to help alleviate liquidity problems. NEWSCENTER begins now.
Good evening to our viewers in Asia and hello to others watching from around the world. Welcome to Arirang News Center. I'm Han-Dan in Seoul.
And I'm Noaram. Thank you, as always, for joining us this evening. Only one place to start, really, and North Korea has confirmed that its leader, Kim Jong-un, will travel to Russia soon for his first ever meeting with President Vladimir Putin.
While the specific date and location are yet to be announced, speculation is high that the summit will take place this week in Vladivostok. Arirang's Oh Jung-hee starts us off tonight.
Confirmation from Pyeongyang that the North Korea-Russia summit is happening soon. Pyongyang state-run Korean Central News Agency reported Tuesday that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un will soon visit Russia on the invitation of President Vladimir Putin. It added that there will be a summit between Kim and Putin. Pyongyang's announcement on the summit comes at the same time as the Kremlin's confirmation that Kim and Putin will meet by the end of April. The upcoming Pyongyang-Moscow summit is the first of its kind in 8 years. In 2011, Kim's late father and the former North Korean leader Kim Jong-il met with then Russian President Dmitry Medvedev. The announcements from both Pyongyang and Moscow have not provided details about when and where the summit will happen. But North Korea's advance team, led by Pyongyang's protocol chief Kim Chang-sun, has been spotted checking Vladivostok since last week. And seeing where they've been visiting, various media outlets are reporting that the Kim-Putin summit will take place at the Far Eastern Federal University, located on Dokdo Island off the coast of Vladivostok. NK News reports that preparations are underway there, with the flags of North Korea and Russia lined up in one of the buildings. Reports say Kim Jong-un will be heading over to Russia's Vladivostok using a special train on Wednesday. And Kim will be staying in Russia until Friday, even though President Putin will leave the country on Friday for a One Belt, One Road summit in China. Kim will tour around where his father had visited 8 years ago and possibly visit the world-renowned Mariinsky Theater, a public aquarium, and Russia's Pacific Fleet headquarters, according to Japan-based Kyodo News Agency. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
South Korea had been exempt from U.S. sanctions on Iranian oil imports, but that is no longer the case. The Trump administration says it'll end the sanctions waivers to all countries that were previously given special exemptions. Our Lee Ji-won has more.
Turning the screw on Tehran, the U.S. says there will be no extension to the current sanctions waiver on Iranian crude oil.
We're going to zero across the board. We will continue to enforce sanctions and monitor compliance. Any nation or entity interacting with Iran should do its diligence and err on the side of caution.
The U.S. withdrew from the 2015 nuclear deal with Iran in May last year, with President Trump saying the agreement had not stopped Iran from developing its nuclear and missile programs. However, 8 countries, including South Korea and Japan, were given exemptions from Washington's sanctions on Iran last November. The 180-day grace period comes to an end on May 2nd, and despite the country's efforts, the State Department said on Monday that President Trump had made the decision to deny Tehran its principal source of revenue. During his press briefing Monday, Pompeo also touched upon concerns of potential market instability.
And we've been working with major oil-producing countries to ensure the market has sufficient volume to minimize the impact on pricing. Both the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have assured us they will ensure an appropriate supply for the markets. And of course, the United States is now a significant producer as well.
Pompeo reiterated that maximum pressure will continue until Iran ends its pursuit of nuclear weapons, stops developing ballistic missiles and sponsoring terrorism, as well as halt the arbitrary detention of U.S. citizens. While South Korea had already cut its Iranian crude oil imports to zero, it relies heavily on condensate or ultralight oil, which is technically not the main target of U.S. sanctions. The news is likely to take a serious toll on many of South Korea's small and medium enterprises in the industry. South Korea's Foreign Affairs Ministry says it has been in talks with Washington on various levels for an extension, and it will continue to relay its stance to the U.S. right until the deadline. 이지원, Arirang News.
In related news, oil prices surged almost 3% on Monday, hitting its highest level this year after the U.S. announced the end of waivers on Iranian oil sanctions. The ban on Iranian oil is also expected to hit South Korea's petrochemical industry, which relies on Iranian oil as a source of ultralight oil or condensate. Our Kim Da-mi has this report.
The South Korean oil industry has been preparing for the worst-case scenario, a complete ban on Iran's oil exports. Since as far back as 2012, when Iran was previously subject to U.S. sanctions, South Korean oil companies have been gradually decreasing their dependence on Iranian oil by seeking alternative importers. The country's crude oil imports from Iran for the first 2 months of 2019 totaled only 61% of the amount imported during the same period the previous year. Domestic oil companies, including Hyundai Oil Bank and SK Energy, have already diversified their crude oil supplies. However, there are concerns as the South Korean petrochemical industry heavily relies on Iranian condensate. Condensate, an ultra-light form of crude oil, is used for producing naphtha, the basic raw material for many petrochemical products, including clothing and footwear. In addition, South Korea's oil industry has favored Iranian condensate, which is between $2 and $6 cheaper per barrel than condensate from other countries.
There's a limited number of countries that can replace Iran and its oil, like Qatar, Norway, and Japan. Because of the short supply, rising prices of oil with condensate will be inevitable.
While companies will now seek alternative sources of condensate, experts note that importing naphtha instead of condensate can be one option, as there are more countries willing to sell naphtha. In order to minimize the damage to domestic oil companies, the South Korean government said it will diversify oil supplies as well as monitor the impact on the petrochemical industry. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
Seoul's Director General for Northeast Asian Affairs, Kim Jong-un, met with his Japanese counterpart on Tuesday to discuss pending issues, including the recent dispute settlement on Seoul's ban on Japanese fishery products from regions around Fukushima. Japanese reports say that Tokyo once again asked Seoul to allow imports of its fishery products, to which Kim said that the safety of Koreans comes first. They also discussed the Seoul Supreme Court's order for Japanese firms to compensate South Koreans forced to work during the Second World War. Tokyo is asking Seoul to take the matter to an arbitration by a third party, but Seoul is yet to respond. Kim is also known to have expressed deep regrets on Japan's annual foreign policy document known as the Diplomatic Blue Book, which again makes false claims over South Korea's Dokdo Islands. Meanwhile, the South Korean government has summoned a senior Japanese embassy official in Seoul to lodge a complaint against Tokyo's most recent claims against South Korea's easternmost islet. Seoul's foreign ministry on Tuesday made the complaint following the release of Japan's Diplomatic Blue Book, which contained the false claims. The ministry also raised the issues of Japan's sexual enslavement of South Korean women and the forced labor of Koreans during Japan's colonial rule. During a press briefing, a ministry spokesperson demanded Tokyo withdraw its claims over Dokdo, stating that it is, quote, South Korean territory historically, geographically, and based on international law. The United Nations Command has approved the opening of hiking trails leading to the demilitarized zone, marking the first time the DMZ will be accessible to civilians since the two Koreas have been divided. The commander of U.S. Forces Korea, Robert Abrams, who also leads the UN Command, said Tuesday it has approved the initial phase of South Korea's Peace Trail project at the inter-Korean border town of Goseong, Gangwon-do province. Other hiking trails leading up to the DMZ are in Cheron and Paju, which have yet to be approved by the UN Command to ensure visitors' safety. South Korea and the United States have initiated a scaled-back joint Air Force drill in place of their usual Max Thunder annual exercise. The two-week drill, which kicked off on Monday, is set to involve South Korea's F-15K and KF-16 jets, F-16 jets from the US, as well as Australia's E-7A airborne early warning and control aircraft. South Korea and the US had conducted the Max Thunder exercise since 2009, but are thought to be holding the smaller scale drill to not disrupt the denuclearization and peace process on the Korean Peninsula. China's new warships, including nuclear submarines and destroyers, are on display in a fleet review near the port city of Qingdao. Tuesday's review was to celebrate the 70th anniversary of the founding of the Navy of the People's Liberation Army. Warships from more than 10 countries joined the event, and more than 60 countries sent naval delegations. South Korea, meanwhile, sent a 2,500-ton missile frigate called the Gyeonggi. North Korea also sent a ship helmed by the commander of the North's Navy, Admiral Kim Jong-un. Turning to local politics now, and in the National Assembly, the ruling party and three others have secured enough support among their legislators to fast-track key reform bills, which they plan to do in a vote on Thursday. The main opposition party, which is not on board, has warned of strong resistance if that happens. Kim Min-ji has more.
A package of reform bills is on course to being fast-tracked. This after the ruling Democratic Party and three minor opposition parties formally confirmed their lawmakers' support for the move on Tuesday. The fast-track measure allows bills to be put up for a full-floor vote even if they haven't been approved by the relevant committees after 330 days. The bills in question include one on electoral reform. It calls for the number of parliamentary seats to stay at 300, but proportional representation seats would be increased to 75 from the current 47. The other bill seeks the creation of a body that will be able to investigate high-ranking government and public officials. The votes to fast-track them are expected to take place on Thursday at the Special Parliamentary Committees on Political and Judiciary Reform. Of the 18 lawmakers on each panel, 3/5 or 11 of them will need to vote in favor. The four parties have met the 3/5 threshold in theory, but there are some in the Paramita party who are holding out. On top of that, the main opposition Liberty Korea party has pledged strong resistance. They see the new system in the electoral reform bill as against their political interests. The Conservatives plan to hold a major protest in central Seoul this weekend and have warned of a total boycott of parliament. Their resistance will make it harder for the ruling party to pass the pile of bills needed to get the Moon Jae-in administration's agenda moving and to deliberate on the government's extra budget proposal. While the four parties have said they will try harder to persuade the main opposition party to come around, it seems unlikely Parliament will get back to normal anytime soon. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
President Moon Jae-in has been meeting with the leaders of Kazakhstan to talk about bringing peace to the Korean Peninsula and Central Asia. His focus was on denuclearization and Kazakhstan's example of giving up its own weapons. Arirang's senior political correspondent Shin Se-min reports.
President Moon Jae-in used the backdrop of an affluent Kazakhstan to press home his point that a non-nuclear North Korea would mean a better life for the North Korean people. Speaking with the founder of Kazakhstan, former President Nursultan Nazarbayev, President Moon said North Korea should follow Kazakhstan's lead and choose economic prosperity over nuclear weapons. Touching upon Kazakhstan's GDP, which accounts for around 70% of the combined GDP of Central Asia, President Moon said the country was able to achieve that because it voluntarily handed over its weapons.
카자흐스탄은 자발적인 비핵화를 통해서 경제 성장을 이룬 그런 경험을 가지고 있기 때문에 우리 한반도 이 비핵화 문제에 있어서 큰 영감을 주고 있습니다.
Kazakhstan also gave its full backing to President Moon's denuclearization drive. Nazarbayev told President Moon that delaying the denuclearization process is only going to make things more difficult and pledged to declare his support on the international stage if necessary. Earlier, during a separate meeting with Kazakhstan's current president, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, President Moon sought support for a nuclear-free Korean peninsula, to which Tokayev responded that his country will continue to fully back peace in any way possible. Kazakhstan once held the world's fourth largest nuclear stockpiles with over 1,400 warheads, but relinquished all of its Soviet-era weapons by mid-1995 and absorbed a policy of non-proliferation. Throughout his Central Asian tour, the president has been securing support from key partners of his new northern policy. But realizing diplomatic and economic benefits with these nations may take some time, as it is closely linked with the speed of denuclearization talks. Shin Se-min, Arirang News, Nur Sultan.
Turning to the local economy now, and the South Korean government has announced that creditors of Asiana Airlines plan to provide financial support to the ailing carrier to help alleviate its liquidity problems. The announcement was made at a meeting today where economy-related ministers also discussed ways to boost the competitiveness of local industries. Ko Ryun-hee reports.
South Korea's finance minister says the creditors of Asiana Airlines plan to inject around $1.4 billion to ease its parent company's liquidity crisis. Attending a meeting of various economy-related ministers on Tuesday, Hong Nam-gi said creditors led by the state-funded Korea Development Bank will buy around $438 million worth of perpetual bonds and set a credit limit of $700 million. Credit limit means the maximum amount of credit that lenders will extend to a debtor for a particular line of credit. This comes after creditors accepted Kumo Asiana Group's self-rescue plan earlier this month, which included selling its flagship Asiana Airlines. Hong added the firm will strive to improve its business conditions and push for merger and acquisitions by the end of the year. KDB, which is the main creditor of major corporations, announced on the same day an additional bridge loan worth around $114 million to be provided to Kumho Bus Lines, the group's de facto holding company. But the bank said Asiana Airlines M&A has to happen first. Besides Korea's second biggest airline, another big issue discussed in the meeting was updating the public on the government's so-called crisis zones for industry and employment. These zones refer to areas that rely on certain industries such as shipbuilding, where many people can face layoffs if that specific field struggles. The government has been providing financial and job support to the regions. Hong said the government will extend the appointed period until May 2021 in 5 regions, including Gyeoje City in Gyeongsang-namdo Province. Ministers also discussed ways to revitalize South Korea's shipbuilding industry. Specific measures include increasing the number of professional personnel in the field and providing more support in terms of refund guarantees. Ko Ryun-hee, Arirang News.
The number of workers who earned above what's considered the minimum living wage increased last year. According to the latest report released by Statistics Korea, workers earning more than 2 million won a month, or about $1,800, increased 4% from 2017 to reach a total of 63%. Those earning below that threshold fell by 4% on year. Most workers aged below 30 were employed in restaurants and bars, while those in their 30s and 40s mostly worked in educational services. Those aged 50 or above mostly worked at farms. The percentage of one-person households in the country has tripled over the past 3 decades, from 9% in 1990 to near 30% as of 2018. This comes as more choose to put off marriage. And as our Kim Hae-sung reports, this phenomenon is also changing the retail landscape.
From pet grooming to pet food, the pet industry in Korea has grown threefold since 2010, reaching $2.6 billion last year, thanks to the growing number of single-person households.
Sales have increased by 20% each year. Most of our customers are in their 20s and 30s. More than half of them are singles who think of their pets as not just companions but their babies. We provide pickup and hotel services to take care of their pets when they're not home.
The number of sports facilities and health clubs have also risen sharply. According to Statistics Korea's sports facilities, the pet industry and skincare shops ranked in the top 10 lifestyle and living-related sectors, with the biggest increase in stores between 2014 and 2018. On the other hand, wedding halls and marriage counseling services nosedived. Statistics Korea attributed the change to the rising number of single households, which recorded over 5 million people as of 2018, adding that shoe stores and stationery stores decreased as more young singles in their 20s and 30s shop online instead of going to the actual stores, leading to an increase in mail-order businesses.
People pursuing careers that take longer to establish. You see things like women participating in the labor force at higher rates. You see things like confined spaces where people are living, and so having a child becomes more troublesome. If you have more single-person households, you're going to have more spending on things that make that person happy rather than trying to find a consensus among multiple people.
The latest survey shows only 1 out of 3 Koreans aged between 20 and 39 thinks marriage is a must.
I don't think marriage is a must. It requires a lot of sacrifices. There are so many things I want to do in terms of self-development, career building, traveling.
And with the number of one-person households expected to continue growing, surpassing four-person household spending by 2030 to become the biggest consumer group in Korea, more changes in living and lifestyle sectors are likely to come. Kim Jong-un, Arirang News.
One of the world's top sopranos, Jo Sumi of Korea, has revealed her new album to the public. And this time, the album is dedicated to all the mothers in the world. Our Won Jung-hwan has the story.
South Korean soprano Jo Sumi has returned with her first album in 4 years, and she has dedicated it to someone very special to her. While explaining the personal reasons behind the album, she told reporters that it is for all mothers who provide warmth like no one else.
Initially, I decided to make this album for my mother, who is suffering from dementia, to give her something to help her remember me. But while making this album, I realized that I should give this to all of our mothers in the world.
While she is now a Grammy winner, the first Asian to win 6 global music competitions, and has some 50 recordings to her name, she was initially reluctant to pursue a career in opera. Her mother had been an amateur singer and pianist who, due to political circumstances, could not study music and pursue a professional career. Because of this, Jo's mother did all she could to ensure that her daughter had the opportunities she never did.
My mother always regretted that she could not have been a professional singer, and I was raised by her being told that I should not get married, that I should one day become the greatest singer and travel the world, and that I should achieve something that she couldn't in the past.
The soprano said when she had to survive on her own in Italy, she then realized how sad it would have been for her mother to give up her dream and instead provide a chance for her. The globally acclaimed coloratura soprano has since gone on to become South Korea's greatest classical export, performing in concert halls around the world and confounding operatic stereotypes as she goes. She is currently on a domestic tour called Mother Dear. The tour will visit 8 cities across the country and will finish at Seoul's Lotte Concert Hall on May 8th. Won Jung-hwan, Arirang News.
Now let's turn to some cultural news. The UNESCO selects cultural and natural heritage sites from around the world and helps protect and preserve those sites. And it looks like some more Korean sites could be added to that list. In part 2 of our part 3 series on diversification of Hallyu or Korean wave, we take a look at the UNESCO World Heritage Sites in Korea. For that, Arirang's Lee Min-sun now joins us in the studio. Good to have you with us.
Thank you.
Min-sun, let's start off with some background information for our viewers who may not be that familiar with Korea's cultural heritage sites. Besides other than the Changdeokgung Palace and Jongmyo Shrine in Seoul, what other heritage sites do we have in Korea?
Right, so Korea currently has a total of 13 World Heritage Sites, including the ones you mentioned. And the World Heritage Sites can be classified as one of 3 categories: natural, cultural, or mixed heritage. And the volcanic island of Jeju was added in 2007 as the Korea's first natural heritage site. And some of the cultural heritage sites also include the historic villages of Korea, Hwae and Yangdong, and as well as the Bulguksa Temple in Gyeongju and Sansa, the Buddhist mountain monasteries of Korea, which were added last year.
Well, it sounds like Korea is continuously making efforts to add more heritage sites to the list. Now, what are some new cultural or natural assets that are likely to be added to the UNESCO's World Heritage Site?
So Korea currently has 2 sites waiting for the final decision from the World Heritage Committee in July. So they are the Korea's Sewon Confucian Academies from the Joseon Dynasty and the Korea's tidal mud flats called Getbar. Let's take a look at the Sosu Sewon, which is one of the 9 Sewons that has been well managed and has important historical value.
Located in the tranquil town of Yeongju, Gyeongsangbuk-do Province, these hanok buildings show the education system and architecture of the Joseon Dynasty. Called Sewon in Korean, these Confucian academies, which sprung in the countryside during the 16th and 17th centuries, are the equivalent of today's universities or colleges. Recognized for their wealth of intangible cultural heritage that shows history, education, rituals, and documentary culture, Korea's Sewons are being considered for UNESCO's World Cultural Heritage List.
Sosu Sewon is the first such academy, and the king bestowed signboards, books and workers to it. Korea's Sewon stand out from similar education institutes in other countries in that Sewon are surrounded by natural features and have a flexible layout in harmony with nature.
Well, those traditional hanok houses are they look so beautiful, surrounded by beautiful natural scenery as well. And it'd be a good weekend getaway too, to go there and watch those pretty Korean traditional houses and feel the serenity of nature as well.
Right, so there are about 640 Sewons left in Korea currently, and this Sosu Sewon was selected as one of 9 Sewons to be nominated for the UNESCO list because it is the first academy to be established and recognized by the king. And in order to be recognized as a World Heritage Site, the properties should have outstanding universal value. Sewons show the typical private education system of the Joseon Dynasty. As a center of local society and education, it produced collections of literary works and was a gathering place for intellectuals. And Sewons have retained their unique architectural style, which is suitable for diffusion of Confucianism in the rural areas of Korea. And the most outstanding features of Sewons is that they were built in harmony with the surrounding natural environment.
Now, this may sound like an obvious question, but why is it so important to have our sites added to UNESCO's World Heritage List?
An expert says it's important not just in terms of having another internationally recognized tourist attractions, but also for us to better understand the true meaning of these cultural properties. So let's hear from a professor about why such efforts are important.
Having sites listed as a World Heritage Site means that Korea's cultural heritage is recognized not only from our own perspective, but also from a global perspective. Through this process, we can also improve understanding of our cultural heritage.
Korea's local and central governments are trying to identify meaningful assets that are worthy of international recognition and conservation. Korea currently has 14 sites on the tentative World Heritage List, including the 7 Gaya tumuli located in the southern part of Korea. And these are the tombs from the ancient Federation of Gaya, which provide archaeological evidence of ancient history of Korea and East Asia.
Well, I certainly look forward to seeing more of these beautiful Korea's cultural and natural heritage sites being more globally recognized. Thank you for that comprehensive report today, Min-san.
Yeah, thank you.
Government agencies will soon have to file a yearly report stating how many female board members they plan to appoint. The law was proposed on Tuesday by the Finance Ministry to be implemented this July. The yearly report will include each board's gender ratio, the previous year's performance and plans over the next 5 years to improve the board's gender equality. Korea's police agency says the number of people caught driving under the influence of alcohol has fallen by 28% since a tougher law known as the Yoon Chang-ho Act took effect last December. The number of traffic accidents caused by drunk driving also fell nearly 3,200 in the first 3 months of this year, down 35% compared to the same period last year. South Korean table tennis champion Yoo Seung-min has been elected to the executive committee of the International Table Tennis Federation. The Olympic gold medalist was elected unanimously on Monday at the federation's annual meeting in Budapest for a term that runs through 2024. He is the first Korean elected onto the ITTF Executive Committee since Han Sang-guk in 2008. South Korean boy band BTS have made it onto the Billboard Hot 100 chart, the gold standard in the American music industry. The chart will be released on Tuesday, US time, and Billboard says the group are at number 8 for their song Boy With Love. BTS have also beaten their own record of having the highest charting song for a K-pop group on the Hot 100. The previous single was Fake Love, which peaked at number 10 last June. That has been your 3-minute news flash.
The cloudy weather Seoul experienced all day has finally turned into rain.
Yes, that's right. And it is expected to spread nationwide tonight. So let's get more details from our Michelle Park, who is at the Weather Center for us. Michelle.
Good evening, guys. Now, heavy rain clouds have been lingering in the southern regions and are expected to drench the south coast with up to 50 millimeters. But that rain will decrease as it travels up the peninsula. Now, do keep your umbrellas handy, though, as there are chances of isolated showers tomorrow. And Beijing will be cool with rainy conditions, while Tokyo can expect similar weather to Busan. Now, morning lows will be higher than the seasonal average tomorrow, so we'll wake up to 15 degrees Celsius, and most regions can expect similar temperature readings. And into the day, Seoul will top out to 25 degrees Celsius, while Daegu and Gyeongju will climb up to 23 and 24 degrees respectively. Now, more afternoon showers are in the forecast this week, and mercury will plunge a few notches on Friday and remain cooler throughout the weekend. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
Well, that wraps it up for this edition of Arirang News. Thank you, as always, for watching.
News in depth is coming up shortly, so stay tuned.